It has been said that reality is what we have within our own heads. The problem is, it's so darn changeable. The Petrified World by Robert Sheckley. Read by Carl. Lanigan dreamed the dream again and managed to wake himself with a hoarse cry. He sat upright in bed and glared around him into the violet darkness. His teeth clenched and his lips were pulled back into a spastic grin. Beside him, he felt his wife, Estelle, stir and sit up. Lanigan didn't look at her. Still caught in his dream, he waited for tangible proofs of the world. A chair slowly drifted across his field of vision and fetched up against the wall with a quiet thump. Lanigan's face relaxed slightly. Then Estelle's hand was on his arm, a touch meant to be soothing, but which burned like lye. "Here," she said, "drink this." "No," Lanigan said, "I'm all right now." "Drink it anyhow." "No, really, I really am all right." For now he was completely out of the grip of the nightmare. He was himself again, and the world was its habitual self. It was very precious to Lanigan. He didn't want to let go of it just now, not even for the soothing release of a sedative. "Was it the same dream?" Estelle asked him. "Yes, just the same." "I don't want to talk about it." "All right," Estelle said. "She's humoring me," Lanigan thought. "I frightened her. I frightened myself." She asked, "Hon, what time is it?" Lanigan looked at his watch. 6:15. Yes, he said as the hour hand jumped compulsively forward. "No, it's 5 to 7. Can you get back to sleep?" "I don't think so. I think I'll stay up." "Fine, dear," Estelle said. She yawned, closed her eyes, opened them again, and asked, "Hon, don't you think it might be a good idea if you called?" "I have an appointment with him for 12:10, Lanigan said. "That's fine," Estelle said. She closed her eyes again. Sleep came over her while Lanigan watched. Her auburn hair turned a faint blue, and she sighed once, heavily. Lanigan got out of bed and dressed. He was, for the most part, a large man, unusually easy to recognize. His features were curiously distinct. He had a rash on his neck. He was in no other way outstanding, except he had a recurring dream which was driving him insane. He spent the next few hours on his front porch, watching stars go nova in the dawn sky. Later, he went for a stroll. As luck would have it, he ran into George Torstein just 2 blocks from his house. Several months ago, in an incautious moment, he had told Torstein about his dream. He was a bluff, hearty fellow, a great believer in self-help, discipline, practicality, common sense, and other dull virtues. His hard-headed, no-nonsense attitude has come with a momentary relief to Lanigan, but now it acted as an abrasive. Men like Torstein were undoubtedly the souls of the earth and the backbone of the country, but for Lanigan, wrestling with the implacable and losing, Torstein had grown from a nuisance into a horror. "Well, Tom, how's the boy?" Torstein greeted him. "Fine," Lanigan said. "Just fine." He nodded pleasantly and began to walk away under a melting green sky. But one did not escape from Torstein so easily. "Tom, boy, I'm thinking about your problem," Torstein said. "I've been quite disturbed about you." "Well, that's very nice of you," Lanigan said. "But really, you shouldn't concern yourself." "I do it because I want to," Torstein said, speaking the simple, deplorable truth. "I take an interest in people, Tom. Always have, ever since I was a kid. You and I have been friends and neighbors for a long time." "That's true enough," Lanigan said numbly. The worst part about needing help was having to accept it. "Well, Tom, I think what would really help would be a little vacation." Torstein had a simple prescription for everything. Since he practiced soul doctoring with a license, he was always careful to prescribe a drug you could buy over the counter. "I really can't afford a vacation this month," Lanigan said. The sky was ochre and pink now, 3 pines had withered, and aged oak had turned into a useful cactus. Torstein laughed heartily. "Boy, you can't afford not to have a vacation just now. Did you ever consider that?" "No, I guess not." "Well, consider it. You're tired, tense, all keyed up. You've been working too hard." "I've been on leave of absence all week," Lanigan said. He glanced at his watch. The gold case had turned to lead, but the time seemed accurate enough. Nearly 2 hours had passed since they had begun this conversation. "It isn't good enough," Torstein was saying. "You've stayed right here in town, right close to your work. You need to get in touch with nature. Tom, when was the last time you went camping?" "Camping? I don't think I've ever gone camping." "There, you see. Boy, you've got to put yourself back in touch with real things. Not streets and buildings, but mountains and rivers." Lanigan looked at his watch again and was relieved to see it turn back to gold. He was glad. He had paid $60 for that case. "Trees and lakes," Torstein was rhapsodizing. "The feel of grass growing under your feet, The sight of tall black mountains marching across a golden sky. Lanigan shook his head. I've been in the country, George. It doesn't do anything for me. Torstein was obstinate. You must get away from artificialities. It all seems equally artificial, Lanigan said. Trees or buildings, what's the difference? Men make buildings, Torstein intoned rather piously, but God makes trees. Lanigan had his doubts about both propositions, but he wasn't going to tell them to Torstein. You might have something there, he said. I'll think about it. You do that, Torstein said. It happens I know the perfect place. It's in Maine, Tom, and right now near this little lake. Torstein was a master of the interminable description. Luckily for Lanigan, there was a diversion. Across the street, a house burst into flames. Whose house is that? Lanigan asked. McElbee's, Torstein said. That's the third fire this month. Maybe you ought to give the alarm. All right, I'll do it myself, Torstein said. Remember I told you about that place in Maine, Tom? Torstein turned to go, and something rather humorous happened. As he stepped onto the pavement, the concrete looked liquefied under his left foot. Caught unawares, Torstein went in ankle deep. His forward motion pitched him headfirst into the street. Tom hurried to help him up before the concrete hardened again. You all right? He asked. Twisted my damn ankle, Torstein muttered. It's okay, I can walk. He limped off to restart the fire. Lanigan stayed and watched. He judged the fire had been caused by spontaneous combustion. In a few minutes, as he expected, it put itself out by spontaneous decombustion. One shouldn't be pleased by another man's misfortune, but Lanigan couldn't help chuckling about Torstein's twisted ankle. Not even the sudden appearance of floodwaters on Main Street could mar his good spirits. He beamed at something like a steamboat with yellow stacks that went by in the sky. They remembered his dream, and the panic began again. He walked quickly to the doctor's office. Dr. Sampson's office was small and dark this week. The old gray sofa was gone. In its place were two Louis Quinze chairs and a hammock. The worn carpet had finally rewoven itself, and there was a cigarette burn on the pew ceiling. But the portrait of Andretti was in its usual place on the wall, and the big free-form ashtray was scrupulously clean. The inner door opened, and Dr. Sampson's head popped out. Hi, he said. Won't be a minute. His head popped back in again. Sampson was as good as a word. It took him exactly 3 seconds by Lanigan watch to do whatever he had to do. 1 second later, Lanigan was stretched out on the leather couch with a fresh paper doily under his head. Sampson was saying, Well, Tom, how have things been going? The same, Lanigan said. Worse. The dream? Lanigan nodded. Let's run through it again. Whether or not, Lanigan said. Afraid? More afraid than ever. Even now? Yes, especially now. There was a moment of therapeutic silence. Then Dr. Sampson said, You spoke before of your fear of this dream, and you never told me why you fear it so. Well, it sounds so silly. Sampson's face was serious, quiet, composed. The face of a man who found nothing silly, who was constitutionally incapable of finding anything silly. It was a pose, perhaps, but one which Lanigan found reassuring. All right, I'll tell you, Lanigan said abruptly. Then he stopped. Go on, Dr. Sampson said. Because I believe somehow in some way I don't understand. Yes, go on. Well, somehow the world of my dream is becoming the real world. He stopped again, then went on with a rush. And that someday I'm going to wake up and find myself in that world. And that world will become the real one, and this world will be the dream. He turned to see how this mad revelation had affected Sampson. If the doctor was disturbed, he didn't show it. He was quietly lighting his pipe with the smoldering tip of his left forefinger. Blew on his finger and said, Yes, please go on. Go on? But that's it, that's the whole thing. A spot the size of a quarter appeared on Sampson's mauve carpet. It darkened, thickened, grew into a small fruit tree. Sampson picked one of the purple pods, sniffed it, set it down on his desk. He looked at Lanigan sternly, sadly. You told me about your dream well before, Tom. Lanigan nodded. We have discussed it, traced its origins, analyzed its meaning for you. In past months we have learned, I believe, why you need to cripple yourself with this nightmare of fear. Lanigan nodded unhappily. Yet you refuse the insight, Simpson said. You forget each time your dream world is a dream, nothing but a dream, operated by arbitrary dream laws which you have invented to satisfy your psychic needs. I wish I could believe that, Lanigan said. Trouble is, my dream world is so damnably reasonable. Not at all, Simpson said. Just that your delusion is hermetic, self-enclosed and self-sustaining. Man's actions are based upon certain assumptions about the nature of the world. Granted, his assumptions and his behavior is entirely reasonable, but to change those assumptions is nearly impossible. For example, how do you prove a man he is not being controlled by a secret radio which only he can hear? I see the problem, Lanigan muttered. And that's me? Yes, Tom, that is, in effect, you. You want me to prove to you this world is real and the world of your dream is false. You propose to give out your fantasy if I supply you with the necessary proofs. Yes, exactly, Lanigan cried. But you see, I can't supply them, Samson said. The nature world is apparent, but unprovable. Lanigan thought for a moment, and he said, Look, Doc, I'm not as sick as the guy with the secret radio, am I? No, you're not. You're more reasonable, more rational. You have doubts about the reality of the world, but luckily you also have doubts about the validity of your delusion. Then give it a try, Lanigan said. I understand your problem, but I swear to you, I'll accept anything I can possibly bring myself to accept. Not my field, really, Samson said. This sort of thing calls for a physician. Don't think I'd be very skilled at it. Give it a try, Lanigan pleaded. All right, here goes. Samson's forehead wrinkled and shed as he concentrated. Then he said, Seems to me we expect the world through our senses, and therefore we must in the final analysis accept the testimony of those senses. Lanigan nodded, and the doctor went on. So we know a thing exists because our senses tell it exists. How do we check the accuracy of our observations? By comparing them with the sensory impressions of other men. We know their senses don't lie when other men's senses agree upon the existence of the thing in question. Lanigan thought over this and nodded, and said, Therefore the world is simply what most men to think it is. Samson twisted his mouth and said, I told you metaphysics was not my forte. Still, I think it is an acceptable demonstration. Yes, but Doc, suppose all of these observers are wrong. For example, suppose there are many worlds and many realities, not just one. Was this simply one arbitrary existence out of an infinity of existences? Or suppose the nature of reality itself is incapable of change, and somehow I'm able to perceive that change. Samson sighed, found a small green bat flattering inside his jacket, and absentmindedly crushed it with a ruler. There you are, he said. I can't disprove a single one of your suppositions. I think, Tom, we had better run through the entire dream. Lanigan grimaced. I really would rather not. I have a feeling... I know you do, Samson said, smiling faintly. This will prove or disprove it once for all, won't it? I guess so, Lanigan said. He took courage, unwisely, and said, Well, the way it begins, the way my dream starts. Even as he spoke, the horror came over him. He felt dizzy, sick, terrified. He tried to rise from the couch. The doctor's face ballooned over him. He saw a glint of metal, heard Samson saying, Just try to relax. Brief seizure. Try to think of something pleasant. Then either Lanigan or the world, or both, passed out. Lanigan and or the world came back to consciousness. Time may or may not have passed. Anything might or may not have happened. Lanigan sat up and looked at Samson. How do you feel now? Samson asked. I'm all right, Lanigan said. What happened? You had a bad moment. Take it easy for a bit. Lanigan leaned back and tried to calm himself. The doctor was sitting at his desk of running notes. Lanigan counted 20 with his eyes closed, then opened them cautiously. Samson was still writing notes. Lanigan looked around the room, counted the 5 pictures on the wall, recounted them, looked at the green carpet, frowned at it, closed his eyes again. This time he counted to 50. Well, can we talk about it now? Samson asked, shutting a notebook. No, not just now, Lanigan said. 5 paintings, green carpet. Just as you please, the doctor said. I think our time is just about up. If you'd care to lie down in the anteroom. No, thanks. I'll go home, Lanigan said. He stood up, walked across the green carpet to the door, looked back at the 5 paintings and the doctor, who smiled at him encouragingly. Then Lanigan went to the door into the anteroom, through the anteroom to the outer door, and through that and down the corridor to the stairs, and down the stairs to the street. He walked and looked at the trees, on which green leaves moved faintly and predictably in a faint breeze. There was traffic, which moved soberly down one side of the street and up the other. The sky was an unchanging blue, and obviously been so for quite some time. Dream? He pinched himself. A dream pinch? He did not awaken. He shouted. An imaginary shout? He did not awaken. He was on the street in the world of his nightmares. The street at first seemed like any normal city street. There were paved stones, cars, people, buildings, the sky overhead, the sun in the sky. All perfectly normal, except that nothing was happening. The pavement never once yielded beneath his feet. Over there was the First National City Bank. It had been here yesterday, which was bad enough, but worse, it would be there without fail tomorrow, and the day after that, and the year after that. The First National City Bank, founded in 1892, was grotesquely devoid of possibilities. It would never become a tomb, an airplane, the bones of a prehistoric monster. Suddenly would remain a building of concrete and steel, madly persisting in its fixity until men came with tools and tediously tore it down. Lanigan walked through this petrified world under a blue sky that oozed a sly white around the edges, teasingly promising something that was never delivered. Traffic moving implacably to the right. People crossed at crossings. Clocks were within moments of agreement. Somewhere beneath the town lay countryside. But Lanigan knew the grass did not grow under one's feet. It simply lay still, growing no doubt, but imperceptibly, unusable to the senses. And the mountains were still tall and black, but they were giants stopped in mid-stride. They were never marked as a golden, or purple, or green sky. The essence of life, Derek Sampson once said, is change. The essence of death is immobility. Even a corpse has a vestige of life about it as long as its flesh rots, as long as the maggots still feed on his blind eyes and blowflies suck the juice from the burst intestines. Lanigan looked around the corpse of the world and perceived that it was dead. He screamed. He screamed while people gathered around and looked at him, but didn't do anything or become anything. Then a policeman came, as he was supposed to, but the sun didn't change shape once. And the ambulance came down the invariant street, but without trumpets, minus trumpets, and 4 wheels instead of a pleasing 3 or 25. And the ambulance man brought him to a building, which was exactly where they expected to find it. There was a great deal of talk by people who stood untransformed, asking questions in a room with relentlessly white walls. And it was evening, and it was morning, and it was the first day. The end.